guest today is Dr. Ilie Jampolsky. Ilie is a recognized leader in psychology, and he served as a trained psychologist on the medical staff and faculty of respected hospitals and graduate schools throughout the United States. He's the author of 7 books: Smile for No Good Reason, Healing the Addictive Personality, Walking Through Walls, The Art of Trust, Listen to Me, Healing Father-Son Relationships, Healing Together, Going from Crisis to Calm During Turbulent Times, and Healing the Addictive Mind. He's currently working on a novel soon to be released. Ilie's books have sold hundreds of thousands of copies around the world and have been published in more than a dozen languages. To learn more about Ilie's work, please visit his website at www.drliejampolsky.com. Join us as we talk about the 12 steps of attitudinal healing and how they can help support patients on their cancer journey. Let me remind you that Ilie is deaf. Jerry Jampolsky, his dad, used to say Ilie rarely, if ever, complained about this or any of his health challenges. Seeing and hearing Ilie, you will get the same sentiment. I did. I cannot imagine seeing Ilie anything else but pure spirit, perfect, whole and complete. Every time we speak, there is an instant joining of mind. This time we talked about health as a state of mind and the role our intent to either join or separate has on the healing journey, and how when the mind no longer sees itself forever in bondage with the body, the mind can be free and at peace even when we're physically sick, and may remain so for a long time. During this podcast, Ilie and I talk about the importance of taking the time to remember our true nature, which is love, and not let one day pass by without doing this. And we also talked about the quality of our relationships and how they determine the quality of our life. Join us as we naturally open to and step into the power of presence and the intent to join and not find fault in one another. Welcome, everyone. Healing today. Welcome.
Thank you. Wonderful to be with you again, as always.
So I'll start by asking you, Ilie, just for the listeners who perhaps haven't heard about attitudinal healing. What is attitudinal healing?
Well, in some ways, the name defines some of it. It's looking at the importance of the attitudes or the thought systems that we hold in our minds, our belief systems about ourselves and the world, our bodies, and looking at it if, in fact, those attitudes do contribute to our health or our lack of it. But attitudinal healing, which was founded by my father, Dr. Jerry Jampolsky, a child psychiatrist many years ago, back in the 70s, I think, now, has reached who knows how many millions of people now across the world. And for our purposes, one of the main things about attitudinal healing that I found to be most insightful and most helpful when we're approaching our bodies or diagnosed with catastrophic illness is that attitudinal healing defines health very differently than we're used to in the medical community. And it defines health as inner peace and healing as letting go of fear. Now, think about that for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
When we have a physical illness, most of us are very fearful, understandably, especially if it's a catastrophic illness where death may be one of the outcomes that obviously nobody wants. We lose all sorts of our sense of inner peace. My gosh, when we get that kind of news, it's very difficult to, think about it. So this definition that my father came up with is that health is inner peace and healing is letting go of fear, is a very different way of looking at or approaching a physical illness. But what he began to find, and we can talk much more about this today, first by working with kids that had catastrophic illnesses, which you can imagine how difficult that is for kids and family members and, are most people's worst nightmare. But he began to notice that when kids were given the opportunity to be and group settings and helping each other, listening, or maybe one kid was, had already gone through chemotherapy and lost, his or her hair, and another kid comes into the group who hasn't gone through that yet, and that the one who has is sort of talking to and helping the other one go through. He began to notice that these kids, all of a sudden, when they were helping each other and listening to each other, that the fear began to vanish. Imagine that. And my dad began to just kind of scratch his head. Isn't this interesting? What's going on here? And he really found that when we are helping another person, our level of pain is transformed. Our level of fear is transformed. And one of the things that he later adapted a lot of these principles to attitudinal healing was that there's sort of this amazing thing that happens to our pain when we're giving, because we're present. We're very present, focused on listening, being empathetic. And all of a sudden, we don't have that same level of fear. Oh my gosh. So he began to develop all these different principles. There's 12 principles of attitudinal healing that were originally designed for kids with catastrophic illness. But as time went on, they were applied to many, many different things, not just illness, but how we approach our relationships politically, on the political level. But one of the things that, for me, with any thing we're looking at and saying, what's attitudinal healing or what's cognitive psychology or different things, I kind of think simply in my mind. And I think in terms of what questions is this asking us? Questions, because if we start thinking about, well, what's it asking? What's it having us ponder? Then we sort of get.
You're absolutely right. It's not the definition. It's like the music beyond the notes,
Exactly.
or behind the notes. Yeah. It's much greater. It's that which transcends the actual definition, which is limiting. To define is the limit. Oscar Wilde, right? So that's what you're touching on.
Right. And I many of your listeners don't know this, but I'm going to ask you to speak a tad slower. I'm deaf, and I have a captioning system, and it's hard to keep up. So,
it is incredible to me.
Given that, I'll apply my some principles of attitudinal healing to myself for a moment around that. So I was busy in my own practice. This is prior to losing my hearing to an autoimmune disease in the early 90s. And I was very, had everything that I thought I wanted in life. Everything was going wonderfully. And if you'd asked me, anything you have that you don't want, I was at top of the world. I really felt great about my life. And then I got sick. I had this autoimmune disease, and it took my hearing, and all of a sudden, my world changed. A psychologist's ears are kind of like a piano player's hands.
I can't even imagine.
I thought, everything was over. My livelihood ended. It was unsure of what the fate of my future was health-wise. I had 2 young daughters at the time, 9 months and 2 years, I think, something like that. And, it was really a dark moment for me in my life. And over time, a few things happened where I was able to look and utilize these principles of attitudinal healing in a way that really began to make a shift for me and my approach to my health. And since that time, I've had other issues, including 2 prostate surgeries. So I'm very familiar with what happens with when those type of things come down the pike. But one of the things that I began to notice was that when we have something that we see as a curse, it's a horrible thing, and we're able to start, at least faintly, to see some of the gifts that are within that, something in our mind begins to shift. Our attitude begins to shift to where maybe there's a different way of looking at this. Maybe there's some purpose in all of this beyond just being a bad thing. And for me, you know, if you asked me what hearing was back then, I would say, well, that's kind of a dumb question. You hear with your ears. It's a biological thing. Your brain is able to perceive things. But if you ask me what hearing is now, I describe it in a completely different way. Words are one very small portion of what hearing is. And to me, there's just so much that we can do with our heart. And really, the attitudinal healing believes that the essence of our beings is love. And when I begin to really take hold of that and practice it, that the essence of my being is love, well, then there's opened up a huge world for me about what hearing is. Okay? And that I could live a life beyond my fear of how was I going to make a living? How would I hear my kids call from the other room? How would I communicate with people who, help people? And as I began to see that the purpose of all communication, not some, but all communication, the real purpose is joining. The real purpose is sharing our heart, sharing love. The real purpose is setting a goal for living right now where we're focused on unconditional love. The real purpose is when I see you as my teacher, I see everybody as my teacher. Then I see my disease as my teacher. Then, wow, the whole world begins to change. Right? And I'm able to find happiness again. So if you ask me today, would I trade in, if I could go back and erase my deafness and all the different things I went through and have it never have happened, I would say no way. It's taught me a tremendous amount. And therein lies the beauty of attitudinal healing. People who become involved in the different aspects of attitudinal healing begin to slowly see the beautiful gifts that are there for them.
Your comment really drew my attention on the many times I was looking without seeing. I was hearing without listening. So what a beautiful comment you made. And it makes for a wonderful reflection for all of us. How many times do we look and we think we see, but do we really? Are we joining? Are we joining when engaging in that act? The same with hearing. So any perception of the senses are there to help us join. Wow. Well, ponder on that for a while. So the impetus there then was to, how do we teach this? How do we encourage people? And it all started with children to do this more, to really truly join in every moment.
Yes, it is. And I'll add a few other things to the approach of attitudinal healing in that although my father and later many, many other people who are practitioners of attitudinal healing certainly are interested in the questions of how do we help other people with attitudinal healing. The fundamental question is, how do we help ourselves? Everybody is there for the same purpose. My father, although he was a professor at Stanford University and UCSF, and very, very accomplished man, he had everybody in attitudinal healing that learn wanted to bring attitudinal healing to other people. He asked that everybody leave their degrees at the door. Everybody leave anything that would separate them and put them in a sort of a hierarchical of, I'm up here and you're coming for me to fix you. No, 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 no. We
We're
are
all the same.
equal people coming in. So the beautiful thing is that people join in a way that is quite remarkable. And that they're looking, when I say they, I'm talking about people who are coming in there their first day, or people who've been practicing attitudinal healing for a very long time. They're there essentially to help remove their self-imposed blocks to love. They're there to learn who they really are. They're there to improve their communication through that love. They're there in essence to forgive.
Yeah.
Now, this is something we don't hear much in medicine or psychology, the word forgiveness. And yet, what oftentimes, and we have found this, there's been many studies done, including at Stanford, about the power of forgiveness and the power of lack of forgiveness in our life that contributes to our physical health deteriorating. And what this is again, my father tried to make things, my father was, unlike many people who are writing, coming up with a new perspective or a new theory that can be very wordy and you need a arm full of degrees to really understand. My father, if he couldn't say things in a way that a first grader could understand them, he didn't say them. And there is an art to that.
Oh, there is, very much so.
And you mentioned before we started the interview about a little book he wrote called Love is Letting Go of Fear.
Yeah.
Now I think is, I don't know, 5-10 million people have read that book.
Oh yeah, and it's a small little book.
Little tiny book and so simple, right?
And so powerful.
Yes, and it's basically one of the main tenets in that is, and this is the main piece of attitudinal healing, is we ask ourselves the question, is it possible for me to heal my painful thoughts and attitudes about the past? Okay, so when we think about a physical...
That's what keeps us stuck in illness. This is what illness is.
Exactly.
My attitudes and thoughts about the past, because I wanted to make it better and I want to change it and I want to mold it and I want to massage it and I want to put lipstick on it for it to look pretty.
Right. It's and when we, addressing the population that you work with, men who come up with a diagnosis of prostate cancer or other types of cancer.
All types, yes.
One might not think about at first glance that our painful thoughts and attitudes about the past having anything at all to do with that present state of illness, or that our painful thoughts about the past, our lack of forgiveness and our anger and all of that has anything to do with our likelihood or our capacity to heal from that. Okay. Now, me, maybe some of your listeners don't, so I'll go into it. I'm not a sort of woo-woo, airy-fairy sort of psychologist.
No, you're not.
I'm very pragmatic.
Yes.
When I'm talking about...
I attest to that.
When I'm talking about this stuff, or I use the words like love and forgiveness and attitude, this is well documented, well researched material that we see that for example, how our painful thoughts and attitudes about the past cause a high level of stress, which causes disease, which inhibits our ability to heal. All of it goes together. So when we're talking about this, it's very pragmatic and very worthwhile. And unfortunately, also very overlooked.
The ability to stay in the present moment, the ability to understand the role that we play in perpetuating isolation, loneliness, despair, cannot be overemphasized. Tell me a little bit about, so this is a very interesting story, just, how your dad decided by working with children, cancer patients, children in particular. So imagine you get a cancer diagnosis, at least, you're anywhere, over 16 or older, you can more or less make a little bit more sense of it. But when you're that young, and somebody tells you that you've got an illness that could potentially kill you or is going to kill you, where do you go from there? What do you do with that? What do you do with that when your parents look at you, when your siblings look at you, when your neighbor looks at you? So your dad works with this very, very vulnerable population. And he's also a student of the course by then. He has met personally Helen Schackman, the scriber of the course, and Bill Thetford. He's a practitioner of the course. He knows those principles and knows about what the course has to say about our demonstrations and how we teach at all times. There's no choice in whether or not we teach. The question is, what do we want to learn? And the course says to teach is to demonstrate. And so he takes that very personally. He realizes the only way to truly do that is to get past roles, past identities. Like you said, leave your shoes, your professor's shoes or your practitioner shoes, your clinician shoes at the door, please. Enter in the sacred space of we're all so much more alike than different. And let's talk about how we can join with one another by truly sensing, by sensing and being that who we are, pure ultimate love with one another. Can we do that? Let's practice that. Let's see if we can demonstrate one another that. And of course, children have that capacity because they're joyful, they're playful, they like to play, they love.
Right. And my father's approach, again, was not so much what do all the smarty pants adults have to teach the kids.
Yeah.
But what did all the kids have to teach the smarty pants adults? And part of but just by the nature that the kids weren't trying to figure it out so much. We get a diagnosis and the wheels start turning, as adults, and
well said.
So much up
Totally.
in our heads all the time about what does this mean? How's this going to happen? How many, one doctor saying one thing, the other saying another. I don't know what so much, such heaviness that we're carrying that we lose the most important questions to ask. Okay. And he was finding that the kids were able to address things that most doctors and most people with diagnosis never even mentioned. For example, death. Okay. Most physicians, most psychologists are not all that comfortable with the subject of death and dying.
Absolutely.
They avoid it like the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And if they bring it up or there's discussion of it, it usually has to do with how they're going to not let it come, how it's not going to happen.
How we're going to ditch it.
Yes. And what he noticed with the kids is that they didn't do that. And there was, they didn't have the same level of fear, if you will, of it. And he began to ask himself why that might be. Okay? And did that transfer to us adults? Could it be? And and this is actually, there's 12 principles of attitudinal healing, and this is actually principle number 11. So in the actual principles, he discusses death. I have a little book that I wrote many years ago for my father's 75th birthday. Dad would have been 100, or no, 97 this year, I think. He died 2 years ago. 2 years ago this Christmas. But one of the principles that I talk about in that book is this one. And principle number 11 is, since love is eternal, death need not be viewed as fearful. So what he was finding these kids doing was essentially, as you say, had a larger capacity than we do to experience that joy, that lovingness, even when they knew they had this disease, or that, and so sometimes in groups, or many times in the attitudinal healing groups with these kids died.
Yeah.
It wasn't swept under the rug. It wasn't denied, but it also wasn't approached as taboo or fearful. So the kids would talk openly about this, and something that's very, very important that most of the time us adults don't feel comfortable doing that, even with, or especially with, our loved ones and family members.
As you were describing this, I had a physical model, an image in my mind that was developing of you and me being on a carpet and playing with a train. The choo-choo trains. Remember, we had them when we were little, and I imagined us talking. You telling me, love is eternal, therefore death should not be feared. And I imagine myself pushing the choo-choo train and saying, "Yep. Since death is not real, that I don't have to worry about it." And you keep on,
very well put.
Right, exactly. And you keep on playing, and you stay soft, and you stay gentle, and you stay lighthearted, and you take in what's true, and it becomes true. Therefore, it's really puzzling to me, Lee, that a lot of the times in our hearts, throughout our lives, that we're so much faster at embracing what's not true, and so much more uncomfortable, say, at doing the opposite of embracing what is true. It is true that we are eternal. It is true that you and I are one. It is true that there's only love. But perhaps because it's not socially, or it may look like quackery, it may look like new agey, it may look like something being phony, we don't tend to engage in this practice very often. And I've tried, even now, I was in my role as a scientist, I go to departmental meetings, and I encourage my colleagues, may I suggest that we don't shy away from really expressing an opinion with regards to whatever the discussion is, that represents how we really feel, rather than, let's be structured about this. Let's be, systematic. Let's be, let's adopt the old way of thinking. But how do you really, think or feel about this? We're gonna hire somebody new in the department. Our world is going through an environmental crisis. Shall we look at hiring somebody that maybe can answer some of those questions or find solutions, or no, we're not going to look there because that's not part of the strategic plan. But so at one point do we take that leap in faith, and we say what we really feel, what we really think, which, when that door opens, it will represent love in one shape, form, or another. It cannot be otherwise.
You're beautifully summating many of the principles of attitudinal healing, when essentially, and forgive me for paraphrasing your beauty of what you said, but what I hear you saying is that in the world, there is not much authenticity today. There's a lot of living in ways that we are not either in touch with our true self, or oftentimes as though we're afraid of that true self. When we don't shy away from our authenticity, we start living a life that's much more alive, even if we might die. Okay. Now, I'm certainly not saying that everybody who gets cancer is going to die. Obviously, they're not, and we want people to live, and we want, medicine does a whole lot of great stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But what if, instead of fearing it, we live to learn from wherever we are, by coming in to our authentic self and finding our gift, if you will. Now, I'm somewhat of a movie buff, though I have a horrible memory for remembering the movies, but this scene I remember. So, and it illustrates this somewhat, and I think a lot of people have seen this movie, the Titanic, from many years ago. Now, there's a scene in that movie where the Titanic is going down. It's not, is this happening? It's
happening. Yeah.
And we see on the ship's deck many different people dealing with this news, that the ship is going down. It's already tilting and it's going into the water. And we see people dealing with this in many, many different ways. We see, for example, grown men pushing women and children out of the way to get into a lifeboat, full of fear.
Yeah.
Okay?
Paralyzed.
Disconnected with helping anybody, only fear.
Yeah.
We see some people throwing themselves irrationally overboard into the icy waters, thinking that somehow that's going to save them. We see people standing frozen in fear, not really being able to do anything. And then we see the musicians. They look at each other, they don't say a word.
Yeah.
They begin to play.
Yes.
In the moment that they knew was the end of their life, they chose to give their authentic gift. Think about that for a moment. So all of these different approaches to the bad news, quote unquote, of death. Okay. So I like to look at this and go, you know what? I can be the musicians. You can be the musicians.
Yeah.
We all can be the musicians with any quote unquote bad news. Bad news is just an opportunity to give our gift. That's all it is. Okay.
Oh my.
So then, whatever is happening, a diagnosis, good news, bad news about it, canceled appointments, whatever the challenge is at the time, don't identify with those challenges. Identify with what you can bring to the moment. Okay? Very, very powerful shift in the way that we think. Okay? I remember principle 10 of attitudinal healing is about this, and it says, we can focus on the whole of life rather than the fragments. The whole of life is your authentic self, the gift, the experience of love. The fragments of life are all the little crap, all the small stuff that's happening all of the time.
Yeah.
Only focus on the fragments, you're going to feel not very good.
It's true.
Okay? Focus on the whole, you're the musicians giving your gifts.
I am very tempted to ask you if you may list the principles of attitudinal healing for our listeners.
Sure, there are 12 principles,
Okay.
and I'll just briefly describe them as we go through. Okay.
Thank you.
Now, remember, these all came from, oversimplifying here, but these all came from asking, is there a better way to go through life? Is there a way that we can approach things that we might see as bad news, challenges, health, all of that, in a way that leads us to being richer people, richer meaning more engaged in our love, more authentic, more caring, essentially, as the saying goes, to decide rather than becoming bitter, we become better. And that's where these were born from. Okay. So the first one is what I mentioned earlier, and that's the essence of our being as love. It's really identifying with that's who we are. We're not our disease. We're not our ailing body. We're not our pain. We have our pain that's going on, but it's not our essence. Our essence is kept safe beyond that.
It's like Rumi used to say, I'm not this hair, I'm not this skin, I'm the spirit that lives within.
Exactly. A psychologist many years ago by the name of Roberto Assagioli, he went down a little bit of a wrong path later in his life, but his early work was good. And one of the things that I liked with him was something called identification, disidentification. So it's important when you're facing a challenge like a diagnosis of cancer, it's important not to deny it or push it away or, go, I'm only love. I don't want to look at all of this. Okay.
It's not happening.
That's not what attitudinal healing is doing. He was taught that first we identify with something and then we disidentify it. Very important. So I have pain, but I'm not my pain. I have an ailing body, but I'm not my ailing body. And then that opens the door to say, well, what am I then? That's where we begin to see that authentic self that we no longer need to shy away from, that we're love. So principle number 2 is, I also mentioned, is health is inner peace and healing is letting go of fear. Okay. Again, it's the very different way of defining health. Okay. Notice you don't see there a differentiation between mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, cognitive health. Just health. Okay, because we're talking again about that whole self. Okay, yeah. So health is inner peace. It doesn't matter what's going on. And how we heal is through letting go of fear. Not denying the fear, not pushing it away, seeing it, letting it go.
Right. It's like that little metaphor that we're playing with the choo-choo trains and you just tell me, love is eternal. We are love. And I'm pushing the train. I'm saying, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't be, death. There's no death. Really, there's only love, which is eternal. Okay. I'm pushing the train and right. I'm in a state of, because I believe you, because I trust you. And I'm lighthearted about it. I'm taking in the truth and I'm feeling the truth. I'm experiencing that truth in a state of joy, in a state of non-attachment.
Exactly. Now, everything you said and what so mindfulness training is becoming very
Popular?
and very
Yeah.
utilized. And mindfulness training is very consistent with the teachings of attitudinal healing. So, for example, with the second one of healing is letting go of fear, mindfulness brings us to the moment of watching that fearful state and seeing slowly that that's an impermanent state. It passes, but we don't attach ourselves to it. It's just bringing it there. And I won't go too much into mindfulness other than saying it's very consistent with, like when you're describing being with the train, you're in the moment, you're mindful, you're very there, right? So,
all my attention and my energy is in that moment. It's not in the past, it's not in the future.
So going back for a moment and describing number 3 of attitudinal healing is one of the things that my father began to notice greatly in the groups of kids is that there was no division between giving and receiving.
I love that.
They were essentially the same. So if one kid was giving to the other kid, that kid was also receiving. If one kid was receiving, so it was just very much in the moment. So
that's why you and I are so joyful right now, because we're giving and taking at the same time. No, seriously, isn't it?
Because
I'm having a blast.
When we get that giving and receiving are the same, we are forever wealthy. We're there in the moment. Sometimes if I have to, think, or somebody asks me to describe my entire spiritual path and where I've come in my life through all that I've done, it would be simply that it's been a process over time of discovering that giving and receiving are one in truth, and that's where my joy comes from. That's if I'm ever having a bummer of a day or not having good news, if I go back to that one truth right there in front of me is an immediate solution where I can feel happy and joyful. Notice I'm not saying that the situation changes. It may or may not, but internally, I find that, if the one thing that we can be I think the one thing that we can all agree on is there's plenty of people in need of love.
Yep.
So there's plenty of opportunity.
Just like me. Yes.
And me. And, what's the one thing that we all need and want?
And it's so ironic. It's so ironic that the one thing that we want most, we push most away.
Fear is a weird thing.
It is a weird thing.
So, we push it away because we think we're not deserving. We push it away from other people because we haven't forgiven. And we think that, withholding love is somehow going to punish them in a way that will either make them suffer or make them better people, all of which are equally irrational things to think of. Yeah. So when we come into a place like attitudinal healing group, and we're focusing on letting go of our fear. We're focusing on, really getting that our essence of our being is love. And we enter the room with one goal, that giving and receiving are one in truth.
Wow.
Something quite magical begins.
Imagine if all of us were to start our day that way, Ilie. Just imagine. I'm back to the Beatles. Imagine that. You wake up in the morning with that intent.
So let's and you, we will do that. Let it begin with us.
Okay.
And I think we probably both do that already, but let's even emphasize it even more. And, here's how most people sleep. They go to bed and they take their garbage can of their mind, all the stuff they're upset about, and they empty it into their bed. And they crawl in and they get all over them. And then they wake up in the morning and they stuff it all back in their head. That's if they slept, And
Yeah, because that stuff has to be maintained. You have to understand. So can I sleep at night if I have to maintain that?
say it again.
That stuff, garbage thinking, has to be maintained. So how I can't sleep at night because I have to maintain it.
Well, exactly. So this leads directly into number 4.
Yeah.
And that's, we can let go of the past and of the future.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is the core of mindfulness.
Yeah.
Okay. It's the goal of really most meditation. It's the, if we really think about where our happiness comes from, okay, it's in the moment. Okay. A while back, I decided that I was going to make a new word. And it was based on the fact that we have a word for looking back. It's called hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
If I had enough hindsight, I would have done this, that, or the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
We have a word for looking forward. If I had foresight, if I have good foresight and I plan and I think about it, I'll avoid any pain in the future.
Mm.
Okay? But we don't have a word for here. So I like the word now sight.
Now sight.
Since we have hindsight and foresight, let's bring on a new one called now sight. And now sight's where my happiness is. Now sight's where my healing is. Now sight's where I get to be with you right now and just love you.
I know, now sight is, I'm thinking, actually, Lee, I have a choo-choo train. It's made of wood and it's in our Zena storage room. I've been keeping that choo-choo train. I don't know why. I don't want to get rid of it. I'm actually literally imagining that the two of us are sitting down as grown-up adults with a choo-choo train and we talk. This is when healing happens, where we take whatever idea comes and it gets automatically, instantly healed, because you remind me that is not to be given any power. That is just not true. And I'm going to move that train. And I'm going to with a clear understanding that it is not true. It isn't true. I'm not going to therefore spend any more time on anything that is not true.
You said something that if we all did, we would be very good. You said, I'm not going to spend any more time with what's not true.
Yeah.
Okay. Very, very important. Okay. If the essence of our being is love, which I believe that it is, anytime we're spending time with what's not that, we're spending time with what's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if we take the last few principles, health is inner peace, healing is letting go of fear, giving and receiving are one in truth.
Mm-hmm.
We can let go of the past and the future. That leads us to what my father came up with, number 5, which is a summation of those. And that is that now is the only time there is, and each instant is forgiving. Okay?
Beautiful.
Now is the only time there is, right now.
Mm-hmm.
And what this time is, which is the only time there is forgiving. Makes life very, very simple.
Mm-hmm. And very joyful.
Notice it doesn't say that tomorrow is the only time there is, and every minute is for me to plan and judge. It doesn't say yesterday is all that's real, so you should feel guilty or have resentment every moment. Because those are the things that we do, our mind does. What attitudinal healing helps us with is now is the only time there is, and each instant is forgiving. Now, this lays the groundwork for number 6. Now, by the way, these don't have to be done in any succession.
Particular order?
They're principles, not steps.
Yeah.
They're all one whole. But
and are those principles also part of his book, Love is Letting Go of Fear? Are the two connected in some way? Because he also has certain principles in the Love is Letting Go of Fear.
Yes, the principles of attitudinal healing are not so much in Love is Letting Go of like listed so much like this, but all of the principles are there. It's
I thought so. Yeah. Okay.
so if we then kind of think about, well, okay, well, what does this mean about my relationship with myself? What does it mean? What's my purpose here? Like if I'm in a relationship that's troubled, what's the solution? Oh, and by the way, how do I create these troubled relationships that happen? What's the source of conflict? All of those are pretty important questions. And he summates it in one sentence. We can learn to love ourselves and others by forgiving rather than judging. Okay. So at this juncture, if somebody's listening to this who has cancer, they'd be like going, seriously, what's this have to do with my cancer? Okay. Well, let me tell you, I speak from experience with health challenges. My way out was learning to love myself. My way through my life has been to be able to love other people. How I've done that is by forgiving myself, others, God, and feeling in that moment the true nature of myself, which is love. How I've gotten myself in more trouble than I care to go into is by judging myself, by being critical of others, by being harsh, by not listening.
Me too.
Okay?
Me too.
So
Me too.
Principle 6 is all about knowing that if you're in some sort of a challenge, you can learn in that challenge to love yourself and others. And you will do that through learning to forgive rather than judge. And if you think this has nothing to do with your physical healing as well, think again.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
A lot of times when people have a diagnosis and they start thinking about their relationships, what they feel is tremendous guilt.
Yeah, you're right.
I should have done this. I wasn't a very good father. My husband, I didn't treat him well, or he treated me horrible and I haven't forgiven him. My parents were horrible people and I haven't forgiven them. I'm carrying resentment for it. Those things impede our healing.
Yeah. You're speaking and you're taking me back down the history lane. And I remember a time in my life where things were going really bad for me. It was really, really difficult. I was going through a horrible divorce, very painful, really tough, and was agonizing in every possible way. And I didn't want my daughter to constantly see a mother that is going through this, because I happen to love and joy. And I remember when the going got really, really tough, I changed my mind. And I instead have decided to be be kind, be loving, give to others. Exactly the principles that you enumerated up to this point. Giving is receiving. Be forgiving, be joyful, be in the moment, be kind, be creative, be generous. And it's funny, my circumstances for quite a while after that didn't particularly change, but boy, didn't I feel better. And now my daughter at 23 almost, she tells me, Mommy, I know we went through a lot when I was little, but because you were so happy, Mommy, we were playing, and Mommy, we were laughing, and Mommy, we were kissing and having a blast full time. It didn't really bother me that much. You know?
And again, you beautifully summate the I swear we didn't plan this, right?
No, we didn't plan any of it.
You beautifully summate the next principle, which what you're talking about is when you start looking for love in other people and in yourself, you find it. And it's a different life that is created than when you spend all of your time being a fault finder, looking for what's wrong or the criticisms and everything.
Yeah.
We've all had the experience of something like you're thinking about getting a new car and you're looking at red Volkswagens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
all of a sudden you start noticing red Volkswagens on the road. And you never noticed, my God, there's a lot of red Volkswagens or whatever the car is, right?
It's true. It's true.
And it's because you indirectly told your mind to look for these things. So we have these minds that are we can either, they're going to follow what we're looking for. We just have to make it conscious. Right?
So true.
So
Isn't the
if
voice
you
that
have a disease or if you have a diagnosis of a chronic illness and you're really thinking, you're really afraid about dying, or you're afraid about the pain that's coming your way, you're going to be directing your mind to find things that reinforce that. Okay. So principle number 7 is we can become love finders rather than fault finders.
Ooh.
Okay. Now, if we go back to the original groups of these kids, which we could also go to groups of adults practicing attitudinal healing, you find people in there that look just like your face right now. A beautiful smile that's radiating. Is their situation beautiful? I mean, is it like, oh boy, I this is the best news ever. I have I have cancer. Of course not. But you walk in there and you notice something quite remarkably different.
Wow.
Back in the 80s, I had the opportunity to be in India and Mother Teresa's missions of charity. And when I first was there, I was thinking it was going to be the most depressing place that I've ever been. You know, people being taken off the streets to die with dignity, or dealing with orphans and people who died, or it just, my mind was. And I walked in there and there was a feeling of love, of deep respect and care. Were people in pain or having situations that were obviously not what we would want? Yes. But the sisters, with their attitude and their kindness and their gentility, created an environment that was radiantly beautiful amidst the despair. Again, going back to the Titanic example, they were playing their music. Okay. We all can do that. So the next principle goes on that, and it's number 8 is we can choose and direct ourselves to be peaceful inside, regardless of what is happening outside.
outside. Wow. Yes.
Think about that for a
yes.
moment. Okay?
Yeah.
We can choose to be peaceful inside, regardless of what is happening outside. As you know, and other people may, a couple of my books are in the field of addiction, and I define addiction differently than most, and that's really whenever we're looking for happiness outside of ourselves, we're setting ourselves up for an addictive pursuit. Okay? So in some ways, this principle of attitudinal healing is taking kind of the falsity and kind of pulling the rug out from under it, so we can see that when we're looking for happiness outside of ourselves, and by the way, sometimes outside of ourselves is this shell we walk around in, our body.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, when I talk about within, I'm talking about our consciousness. Okay? So if we're hanging our hat of happiness on having a healthy body that never gets old and has pain, good luck with that. Okay. So it's important, whether we're facing age and illness, an accident, to remember that we can choose to direct ourselves to happiness, to peace inside. And when I say be peaceful and be happy, I'm really using them interchangeable, not talking about transient happiness.
You know, again, you remind me of a technique that has worked really well for me in my life. And now that I'm past 50, I don't, it's okay. People can laugh at me if they want to laugh at me. I really don't care. So I'm going to share it. But one of the things that I do, and I used to do all throughout my life that I'm not ashamed of, is if the going is really tough and I really want to remind myself about who I am and be the love that I feel inside, I would literally start caressing myself and say, actually, you're okay. You really are okay. I really like what you did the other day. That was so nice. You're a good person. You're a really good person. You're a good person. And I would talk like this. And I want to tell you, even as I'm explaining this to you, I'm feeling the warmth in my heart is opening and I'm saying, yeah, actually, you know what? This is good. I can feel the love within. I'm not afraid. I'm back to my center. I know it's not mindful thinking, it's not meditation necessarily, but it does the trick like magic for me.
I think that is not only wonderful, it's essential. And whatever ways we find that allow ourselves to love ourselves, okay, whether they look silly to other people or not, okay. And if I ever make it to 50, I'll let you know. No. Wait, what are you laughing at? So one of the things that is just a lovely exercise. Actually, a dear friend reminded me of this the other day, is whether you're waking up or going to sleep or having a hard time with something, to take the time to caress your own heart, hold hands, and to close your eyes and just breathe love into your heart. Just imagine all that love going in, and you can bring, words to it, of I'm allowing love to enter, or I'm loving myself gently, all of that. And then after we do that, we can also include other people and slowly open our hands and imagine the love radiating out to other people. So there's all sorts of little tools that we can use, whether it's caressing ourselves, or loving through our heart, that remind us. Because if we don't do which is sillier, okay?
Exactly.
Caressing ourselves or berating ourselves every day, but I can't believe I did that again. I'm such an idiot, okay? Because that's what our ego, left to our own, people are used to seeing that or hearing it. So that's what people see as normal. That's toxic. That kills us. That keeps us in the disease.
I agree.
So it's great to do things that other people might go, is that lady caressing herself?
Hey, she's a what? She's a scientist? Oh my goodness.
So
I don't know. Am I getting wiser? I don't care. I really don't care.
And I try and remind people in kind-hearted ways, and I use a lot of humor doing it too. But what most people call normal is insane.
I totally. And we have come to accept it without even question it, without even blinking anymore. Sometimes we get stuck at work in meetings that last leave for 3-4 hours, and we're all sitting down, and I'm hearing colleagues telling me I almost had a heart attack, or I thought, my heart is going to stop. I'm so stressed. Am I going to have a stroke? And on occasion I tell everybody, may we please get up? And I start, opening my arms, and I move my arms in venue. I do a little bit of qigong and so on. And you can tell they love it, but there has to be some sarcasm. There has to be some put down. There has to be some dissing what's happening, because it's not appropriate. It's not the rule. We're supposed to sit down for 5 hours and not get up and not stretch and not drink water and not move.
Right. So again,
It's insanity. It's insane.
I'll use that as a segue to move to the next one I want to address. By the way, 9, 10, and 11 principles we've already talked about. One is we're students and teachers to each other. Another is we can focus on the whole of life rather than the fragments.
Mm-hmm.
And another is, since love is eternal, death need not be viewed as fearful. But I want to go to number 12, because for me, in my own career, I've developed something that I think we discussed one of the other times called inspirational psychology. And inspirational psychology really holds attitudinal healing and the principles within it as well. In fact, I'm thinking about connecting them even more. But one of the things about attitudinal healing, A Course in Miracles, some other spiritual traditions, and in my own work of inspirational psychology, that I find to be very, very meaningful, again, is to somewhat make things very simple. Now, when I was in graduate school, and I'm sure you were the same, we learn about all sorts of thought systems, emotions, cognitions, and I'm not saying that is necessarily not useful, but it's way over complex for my purposes, and I believe something else to be true. And this is making it very simple, that there's really only 2 emotions. That's right, only 2. All of the others stem from that.
Yeah.
One is love and one is fear. When we pause and we think about, well, what stems from love? Compassion, kindness, gentility, understanding, empathy. When we think about the other, fear, what comes from it? Anger, attack, judgment, anxiety, regret,
Adversity.
criticizing,
Mm-hmm.
guilt.
Mm-hmm.
So when we view things as there's really only 2 emotions, it becomes easier for us, especially during challenges, to ask, am I coming from love or am I coming from fear?
Mm-hmm.
Because then we kind of know which direction we want to go. To carry this one step further and talk about other people's behavior, right, which is a national pastime. Everybody likes to talk about other people's behavior, not so much their own. Okay, so and this lack of responsibility and constant projection of criticism and wrongdoing is, joking aside, epidemic and causing
Beautiful. Yes, it
great
is.
deal of division and distrust in our world and within ourselves.
Yes.
So I like to think about relationships as really dependent on how I am perceiving you. Okay. Notice I didn't say how you are. It's how
am I perceiving
you? Because it's
a process within here.
It's all perception.
Yeah.
Okay. If I staged robbery and then I interviewed I interviewed everybody, we're going to get a whole lot of different descriptions. And then if I went into to talk about motivation, and I said, well, what do you think motivated this person? we would get, oh, he was just a horrible person, that's why. Or, oh, no, she's lived a very difficult life. She was having a difficult time. She had to feed her kids. We would have all sorts of different perceptions, okay, about motivation. So I really like to say and emphasize that when we're coming up against a disease or we're having other challenges with other people, it's our perception of the situation that is going to either lead to peace or fear. So number 12 then embodies all of this. And it's basically saying, I'll say the principle in a minute, but it's basically saying that there's really only two forms of communication. Okay? One is making a call for love, and the other is expressing love. Expressing love is always a beautiful thing. Calls for love are typically pretty darn ugly. Okay? When very few people, how many times has anybody come up to you and said, you know, I'm feeling a lack of love today. I would really like to feel loved by you. We don't hear that.
No.
But you want to know something? Every time somebody attacks you, says something harsh, is carrying on their guilt, is having a bad day, they're making a call for love.
Yeah.
And we just don't usually see it that way. So number 12 is we can always perceive others as either loving or fearful and giving a call of help for love. Either people are being loving or fearful. They're either giving a call or help for love, or they're expressing love. Okay? There's no other thing you need to know ever. And now our egos will argue with that. But what about somebody, what about war? What about Hitler? What about all, I'm not saying we don't have boundaries. I'm not saying we don't put ourselves, that we go ahead and put ourselves in harm's way. I'm not saying if you're in an abusive relationship, just go home and love the abuser and everything will be fine.
Yeah.
But I am saying that at its core, okay, in essence, there's an old saying that, not with, like, if you withhold forgiveness from somebody, it's like swallowing poison and expecting the other person
Somebody else to die. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Lack of forgiveness hurts us, carrying resentment hurts us.
Yeah.
So in the years that you've known your father and the work that he's done, has he continued his work with cancer patients, or has his work with cancer patients has been done primarily at the start of his attitudinal healing career, if we may call it that?
My father embodied trust in his work to grow in directions on its own. So unlike most situations or most things, he didn't control anything. He trusted that when people received training in attitudinal healing, facilitator training, that they would listen to their own wisdom and reach out in ways to whatever group that or audience that they felt guided to do. So through that wisdom, attitudinal healing grew, over the decades into reaching relationships, universities, medical schools, dealing with war-torn parts of the world, nonviolence training, racial healing, racial tension. Many people took it in many different directions. Through that, some of the emphasis went away from dealing with cancer patients and dealing with many different things. Now, it's curious that you asked that question, because I think, for example, what we're doing today is an important work, an important beginning, and to sort of reseed, if you will, some of the original work of attitudinal healing. Not that it, and I don't think that takes away at all from any of the more progressive parts that it has grown into. But there's so much wisdom and beauty in it, just even in my own life, as I described, it served me very, very well in getting through my own challenges with health issues. So it's not the sole thing anymore, but I think it continues to be one area that is calling out to be revisited. So I'm grateful for you to see that importance with the population that you're working with.
Yes, and I don't know why, but I think our work is just beginning, Lee. I think somehow we are going to do some work together with cancer patients and healing and patient empowerment programs.
I would welcome that. In fact, winding up a little bit here, but I was just this morning conversing with some people who have been in attitudinal healing for quite a long time. And one of the original programs that was largely with the cancer patients, but grew into a larger program that later, just with all the other programs, kind of went by the wayside, but we're looking at the power of it and reinitiating it. And that's called, my dad had something called the person-to-person program. And what he would do is, largely using his own intuition, is he would bring two people together and basically say, here's the principles, he give them some guidance, but he just kind of had a gut sense that these two people would work well together in giving and receiving love and healing and all what we've talked about today. And it was very, very powerful. Now let me just remind folks. So so attitudinal healing is, I think, in 60 countries, something like that now. And who knows how many thousands and thousands of people.
Yeah.
Now, my father at the Centers for Attitudinal Healing never charged. So there's was never any fee. There was not any, this is not a money-making endeavor.
Yeah.
He, in the same way that he said everybody leave their degrees at the door, it wasn't a place where people were coming to get jobs or doing the other things. It was to heal themselves, to learn, to experience the beauty that's within all of this. Now, I'm not saying money is the root of all evil or anything like that. It's fine, but it's quite unique in our world today to have something as rich and amazingly useful as this, that did not have the overlay of big
money.
commercial.
Yeah.
And interestingly, in some ways, that has also been the challenge, because things are and are, there was no internet or anything back then, and things now are
yes, and you have costs, you have some infrastructure. Yeah. Yeah, very, very interesting. Well, I cannot thank you enough. I'm thanking Judy for bringing us together, who also, I remember her writing an email, or did she write to me, or were we on the phone, and she said, you need to connect with Lee. You need to meet Lee. That was that.
That's that person-to-person thing. So
there you go. Exactly. She did precisely that. And was just, I want to tell you, you have a very special place in my heart. Very special. Very, very special. Every time I think of you, I smile and my heart opens up, and just complete direct communication, instant joining. And I cannot thank you enough for your generosity of spirit to spend this time with me, to share from the heart, your experience with attitudinal healing, your experience with A Course in Miracles, your experience living those principles in your life, and your books, your many books that you've wrote. And so I really am very, very grateful for all this time and all the love that you shared with us today. And
Thank you. Likewise.
thank you. We will see each other again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And this concludes my interview with Dr. Ilie Jampolsky. For more information on Lie's work, please visit his website at www.drliejampolsky.com. Thank you for listening. Until next time, be well and take care of yourselves.